your stance on eating more carbs or more calories on rest days?
That's a great question. I think this is absolutely individually dependent. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think looking at the individual and where they're at in their programming and stuff, I think that has to come into play. Now, I'll say that I have people that do really well on just consistent macros 7 days a week, whether it's a rest day or a training day. I also have people that just really don't have much of an appetite on their rest days, and they do better with more of a calorie cycling approach. At the end of the week, it's still going to be the same amount of calories, right? It just depends on how we split them up. If you have, say, 5 high days and 2 low days, or 7 days consistent, whatever you want to do. I think that it's very, very individually dependent. Now, I will say that I think a lot of people fear eating more on rest days, right? Because they're caught up in this, like, oh, I'm not working out, I'm not burning it, so I can't eat it. That's not what it needs. Your body needs the calories in order to recover. Calories are food. Calories are medicine for our body, right? Our bodies do not heal unless we have the nutrients to help it heal. So a lot of times what people don't understand is you're breaking down so much on your training days, right? You're breaking down your muscle tissue. You're getting so exhausted. Yes, you're burning a lot of calories, but that afterburn is going to last for 24 or 48 hours. Your body is recovering on the days that you're not training. So if you think about it like that, right, giving your body more calories on your recovery day is going to help you recover better. It's not going to make you fat. It's not going to do any of that. At the end of the week, it's still about the total amount of calories. But this is one of the things I was talking about earlier, is trying to help teach people about how their body works. Because so many people, and I'm sure you've seen it too, is they'll eat fine on their training days, but then they eat like a bird on their rest days, and they can't understand why they're not making any progress, right? Do not fear eating carbs or more calories on your rest day. However you want to plan it out during the week, whatever is most beneficial for you in terms of sustainability is the way that you need to do it. At the end of the week, it's still going to be the total amount of calories that you consume. That's going to be the most important. I will say that I think that more people could probably benefit from eating more on their rest days, right? So, especially if you're, on very low calories, right? You're on very low calories and stuff. I mean, you're just beating yourself into the ground on your training days, right? I mean, you're taking in very few calories, and then you're exercising a lot. You're burning it all off. Your body needs to recover. But those are the types of people that tend to not want to eat more on their rest days because they're afraid they're not going to make progress. And that's just simply not the case. You might find you make better progress, right? Because your body is getting the nutrients it needs to recover, to heal, to get you back in the gym, to give full effort the next time you get back into your training session. And those are kind of some things that I think the general public doesn't really take into consideration. And that's where a really good coach could step in and be like, listen, this is the reality of the situation. All right. The macro picture of it all is total calories. All right. Are you taking in more than what your body needs? Are you taking in less than what your body needs? From there, obviously, are you getting enough protein for your body's needs based off your lean body mass? And then from there, what is going to be the most efficient breakdown of those calories on a day-to-day basis to help you perform at your best, but also to recover at your best? Because if you're not recovering, you're going to go into the next training session and you're not going to have the energy to put forth that you need to with your training. You're going to be more prone to breaking down and getting injured or sick. So I think that more people could benefit from eating more on their rest days, but I just take it on a very individual basis with people. So
what I explain my clients generally is we can calorie cycling, and if we focus on your total weekly calories instead of like individual calories on a daily basis, it is exactly the same whether you eat more or eat less. I try to teach a lot of kind of learning to read your hunger cues and also understand, well, if you are not moving as much, but you probably haven't been training as hard either, you probably are fine to just eat less and maybe allocate more food for the days that you're moving more and exercising more. Yeah, but sometimes it would be the other way around, and probably your rest days are actually the ones that you're feeling like you are hungrier. And the days you're not training, you're not feeling as hungry. So it is learning, how is my hunger? How much do I want to eat right now? And trying to understand your body in different stages. And obviously, every person is going to respond differently, and every person is going to have different hunger cues. And some people have generally or naturally a higher appetite than others. So that is another point that could be a difference between someone who is hungry all the time. Like I could be hungry all the time if I am training or not training. So for me, it's even more critical to have like a very structured meal times where I am not like I am allocating food, even if I'm not too hungry, but kind of teaching my body that it is time to eat or it's not time to eat. So it's kind of teaching or learning these skills.
I actually find a lot that on my non-training days, I'm hungrier.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is because when you're training, you're in this very sympathetic mode, right? Your body, your central nervous system's firing. You're on this very sympathetic mode. You want to get down to that parasympathetic mode. That's when everything kind of starts working properly. Your digestive system's working properly. Your hormones are more regulated, everything like that. So when you allow yourself to calm down, you're not so worked up. You're not so anxious. You're not so any of that. Your hunger cues start to come back a little bit more. So I actually tend to be a lot hungrier on my rest days than I do my training days.
Me too. That is totally true. It's going to be like a choice. This is this or that. So I'm going to give you like to choose between a few options, and you got to say, well, this one is kind of the best option and why.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
Ready.
So the first one is simplicity or complexity when it comes to training and nutrition programming.
Oh, I am 100% simplicity. I tell everybody, all my clients and stuff, I'm like, listen, if you're going to do training with me, don't expect some meso and microcycles and all that stuff. Is there a time and place for that? Yes. But the majority of people out there do not need that complexity of training. They need to learn how to master the basics. My programs are very effective, but they are not exciting. And I tell you that, and I tell everybody who's listening to that, I'm not trying to not have you hire me as a coach or anything like that. I'm just being honest that you do not need super complex training. Most of the time, you don't need to change training programs for 12, 16, 20 weeks. You don't need to change them that often. You just need to keep progressing little by little and stuff. And the honest to God truth is training is boring. Good training is boring, right? Now, obviously there's these programs out there that are going to keep you excited and all that stuff. They're just overcomplicated. They're people that sell these types of programs or market these types of programs, right? They're no better or worse than a very simple program, but what they're doing is they're trying to make it seem like there's some kind of guru, right? Because that sells. I'm very upfront with everybody. I'm like, my programs are going to be effective. They are going to get the job done if you apply the right intensity, but they're not exciting, right? And it's meant to be that way because training is a very, very simple thing. Nutrition is a very, very simple thing. What happens is people overcomplicate everything.
And again, and I think this applies as well to your diet. Like people, I think clients that are expecting every week to have a change in their plan or in their calories.
Yeah.
And like, just tell me what the plan is, or like, what are my calories? And like, you don't need to have any major changes. Like I have clients that will be for 3-4 weeks on pretty much a stable if their body is responding.
And that's important. That's a good thing. People need to understand that is a good thing. Like there's no badge of honor dropping lower in calories.
Correct.
You want to be on as high calories as possible.
And I find this sometimes very confronting because you want to teach them it is okay. Your body's responding at the right rate. There is nothing magical about dropping your calories more for something that you don't necessarily need to add more extra complications and more extra pressure. And especially it's better to know that you're getting used to a certain number of calories that you're utilizing for a few weeks rather than telling your body a new change every week is coming. And like, for me, that is overwhelming.
Well, and you're teaching the client to understand patience. You're teaching them to understand that, okay, one of the things from the very get-go with every client is I tell them, I would love to have you for 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? But realistically, that's probably not going to happen. I want you to be in a position when you do leave me to be able to sustain this on your own. And one of the things that people do when they're on their own is anytime there's one little hiccup or there's one little slowing in weight loss, they make a drastic cut right away. And that's not, so by teaching them what you're doing and what I do too is there's many clients that for 3-4 weeks, we don't make a change because they're losing within that appropriate amount of weight loss or whatever throughout the entire time. But you're teaching them to trust their body, to trust that their body is going to work for them instead of them. People always get in trouble because they don't listen to their body. They try to force things on their body. And I think that the coaching, I know how you coach, and I know we coach very similar. We teach people to learn how to trust their body, right? Because it's the most important thing that you have is your health and your body. So by not making those changes every week, it's slowly ingraining into their head, okay, I don't have to freak out just because I had a little less weight loss this week, right? I don't have to.
And actually, the other thing is, I have clients that they haven't been even compliant. Like when you look at their calories and they're expecting to have a change in their, like, I would be happy to change it if whatever we plan to do is kind of unrealistic for them to achieve or is getting them into a place of overwhelm. But if they know that they weren't able to be consistent or implement the strategies they needed to implement to be compliant, then you don't want to start adding more drastic changes or drop your calories. You want to see how the body responds at those calories before you do any change. So it's
and how many times have you had a client who maybe had a little slow weight loss 1 week or whatever, and you just decided like, okay, we're not going to make any change. We're just going to be patient. And then you see the next week, their body drops big time, right? Sometimes the best move to make is no move at all. It's just to sit still for a minute, because there's so many factors that come into play that have nothing to do with calories as to why your weight went down or didn't go down or went up or whatever. Constipation. Did you have higher sodium that week? Were you more stressed? Was your sleep off? Women, were you on your cycle? Was your training intensity higher? I mean, the list goes on, but everybody, it's training the client to understand that there's more variables than just calories in versus calories out.
Yeah. And I've always said this to my clients. Weight loss is very simple, but it's not easy. It is very simple because you need to create a calorie deficit. And that is a law of thermodynamics. That is no way that you will be able to change that. Right. But when we think about the complexity of weight loss, it is much more than just a calorie deficit, because we need to understand the complexity of a human being and all the different factors that are interacting with this person at one point in time or a period of time. So I think it is important to interpret that and understand that, yes, you need a calorie deficit, but you can't just focus on that. You have to be looking at the entire picture and manage your stress and manage your sleep and be consistent with your training and manage your mental health and like all of these things playing.
So I have a YouTube video out that I kind of talk about stress and I describe it as like a glass full of water, right? So everything that we do is filling this glass up little by little, and the glass represents our body, right? The water is eventually going to get to the very brim of that glass, right? And it does not matter what it is. It could be someone cutting you off in traffic and pissing you off, and that's going to make that glass, that's going to be another drop of water, and then it's going to make that glass overflow, right? And what's going to happen is that's going to overflow into all aspects of your life, all right? Even though it might not be a training stress that made that overflow, it's going to overflow into your training. It's going to overflow into your relationships, into your job, into your, friends, whatever you want to, whatever it is, your diet, things like that. So managing the stress is just so crucial. And, we are a very complex organism, our body, right? It's not just one system that runs it. There are so many systems in our body that have to work in conjunction with each other to be at our optimally best, state of being and everything like that. So it's important. And I know you do it and I do it. And there's a lot of good coaches out there that teach the importance of stress management along with this, because I've seen so many times people are afraid that this is a great example. They're not losing much weight. It's kind of time for a diet break. It kind of coincides with them going on vacation, right? And they're like, oh, I can't go on a diet break. I'm not going to be working out as much, all this stuff. I'm like, just trust me, right? They go, they eat more, they come back, they've actually lost some weight. And they're like, well, how did this happen? I said, you were so stressed out from your job and from the kids and from working out. Your body was just this cesspool of stress, right? You needed to go away. You needed the cortisol to drop so that it could let go a lot of that water weight that you were holding on to. It could get more efficient fat burning going on. And that's what happened. So we get so caught up in our everyday life and our stress that we don't take time to manage that stress, right? We focus on our diet. We focus on training, right? We focus on work. We focus on family. Well, we're never focusing on how to deal with the stresses of all that stuff, right? We put together a perfect plan for training, the perfect plan, I use that in quotes, right? For nutrition. There is no perfect plan. All right. The perfect plan is going to be what is going to work for you, where you take science, like I said earlier, and you take you and you mesh it together and you find a formula that's going to work for you.
I agree.
So all my dogs just came rushing up into my office. So
that's fine. All right. Let's move to the second question of this or that.
Okay.
So if you only can choose one thing in a very, very busy day for a fat loss client, what would you prioritize? Or what would be the most effective or efficient to do? Is resistance training, or is it cardio, or is it total daily steps? If you can choose between these three for the client to make it a non-negotiable, which would
what was the third option?
Resistance training, cardio, or daily steps. So let's say 10,000 steps a day.
Okay.
Like, what would you tell them? I want you to, like, if you can't make this happen, like if you have prescribed resistance training or cardio or both, and on top of that, you want them to achieve certain number of steps in a day, what would be your kind of non-negotiable for a fat loss client?
Man, this is a good question. This is tough because the answer I want to give is probably, so the answer I want to give is resistance training. All right. Because I'm a firm believer in that. However, if the goal is fat loss, the cardio is going to be a very efficient tool for that, right? That is going to be in the short term, a more efficient tool for the fat loss, right? So as much as I want to say resistance training, and people are probably like, oh my gosh, he's not saying resistance training is number one. If the goal is fat loss, I'm going to say cardio. And that does not mean you don't do resistance training, but if it was one day and it was just, and we're taking this on a 1 day basis, we're not taking this on a whole week. That's why I'm saying cardio would be number one, because of the intensity and the efficiency and the amount of calories that you can burn in one session. I'm going to say that. But please, whoever's listening to this, do not think that resistance training is not important or steps are not important. This is simply on a 1 day. You only have time for one thing and it's for fat loss. I'm going to go cardio.
Okay. Interesting. What if we were to consider in the same scenario, the person is very, very stressed out and emotionally fatigued, and probably going for an hour of cardio or 45 minutes on a bike is probably going to be more like they've been sitting in meetings all day and like going onto a treadmill or into a spin bike. Is it the right?
That's
what would you choose in that case?
That's training, a great
10,000 steps or cardio.
That is a great alternative scenario. So I agree with you. I'm not going to choose the cardio in this case. And the reason is because you have all this stress compounding, like getting on and doing a monotonous treadmill workout or stair stepper. I don't think mentally that's going to be the best thing for you. Now, this is where it's interesting. And I think that this is very individually dependent, because someone in that scenario could be like, oh my gosh, I just need to go hammer some weights. I just need to get in there and just hit some weights, feel like I'm moving something, right? That would be me. That would be me. Like, I've had a stressful day. Let me just go get some squats, some deadlifts in. Let me just take out some aggression, right? So that's not a bad approach. I think probably for the common person, for most people, it would be go out in nature, get your steps in, let your body come down from that sympathetic mode to that parasympathetic mode. All right. Don't go out and do speed walking. We're not talking speed walking. We're not talking Olympic speed walking here. We're talking casual walk outside around your neighborhood, get some fresh air. That's going to do so much more for your stress levels in the long run. Compounding that with hitting weights or going on an hour-long stair stepper is probably going to make things worse. It kind of goes back to that same scenario I just talked about when people take diet breaks and go on vacation, right?
Yeah.
It brings that stress level down. So I think in this scenario, for most people, would say just go take steps, go do your steps.
Okay. Sleeping 1 more hour or going for your morning cardio?
Well, coming from someone who doesn't sleep very much, so I will always, part of me wants to say, obviously just go for the extra hour, which is what I would probably sell for most people. I think it's important too. Like, are they already sleeping 7 to 9 hours? Right? Are they sleeping 7 to 9 hours already? And it's
let's put it this way. Someone who's very busy, a parent, perhaps they sacrificing nights to look after the babies. Gotcha. Or early or new parents, or maybe someone who has to wake up very early for work, or they have to commute for very long hours to get to their jobs. Is it worth it to sacrifice 1 hour of extra sleep? They could be more rested if they could put that hour of cardio or training in another time of the day.
So I think that's the important key. I'm glad you added that, because that changes the perspective completely. Because if that is the only time that they can get it in and they have their goals that they're trying to achieve, some things are going to have to be sacrificed. For every goal you go for, there's going to be sacrifices, right? But I'm glad you added that caveat. If you can get it in another time of the day, it might be not your most favorite time of day to do it, right? It may be a little inconvenient. You might have to move some stuff around or whatever, but rest is just so crucial. If you can avoid it, skimping on your sleep, please avoid it. Like, get your sleep in. That is where we restore. That is where we heal. That is where we recover. And people think about it more so from like their body recovering, right? Like, oh my God, I need my sleep because my body needs to rest. Think about your mind. Our mind is working so much more during the day than our body is. We are juggling sometimes 10, 15 things at one time. All right. Yep. Sleep is so crucial. So if you can do it at another time of the day, it might not be your favorite time. You might be like, oh my gosh, this sucks. Like, I don't want to go do it after work. But if you can, get that extra hour of sleep.
Okay. All right. Last one on this category. Okay. For muscle building, what is more important? Additional calories or a calorie surplus, protein, or resistance training? If you had to pick one, which one would you pick?
Man, you got some good questions here. I'm going to say the resistance training. It has to be the resistance training, in my opinion, because if you're not providing that stimulus for growth, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the protein and the calories, if that stimulus is not there to utilize those calories to help build, repair, and build, then what's the point, right? Like, yeah, you're going to get bigger, but you're going to get fatter. You know what I mean? So it has to be the resistance training. It absolutely has to be. I mean, how many guys, and a lot of guys, and women too, I mean, but a lot of younger guys, how many of them don't really pay much attention to their nutrition? They're probably under eating, but they start lifting weights when they're in high school and they just start growing, right? Because they're in that, because that stimulus is so important. So the other stuff 100% is crucial, but if you're not training, what is that stuff going to help build?
I 100% agree. And actually there is evidence to support that you could be on a calorie deficit and build muscle, or you could be not eating an optimal amount of protein and still build muscle. Obviously, depending on the scenario, like if you're someone under steroids or a beginner, right, maybe you even have more chance of building muscle without really paying too much attention to your calories or your protein when you just start doing resistance training. So, absolutely. Bing, bing. Good answer.
Yep. I like that segment. That was a good segment. Made me think early here in the morning.
Good. All right. Let's move to the last part, which is overrated, underrated.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right.
So
let's do it.
You got to obviously say whether this is overrated or underrated and why.
Okay.
Okay. The first one is adjustments of macros and training every week for every check-in. Overrated or underrated?
Overrated. Absolutely overrated. And we kind of touched on that earlier, how, I won't rehash all that, but be patient, guys. One of my favorite phrases to tell people is, you didn't get to where you're at overnight. You're not going to get to where you want to get to overnight. Right. So be patient. Most of the time, and this is the harsh reality of training and nutrition, is you're not going to see drastic changes on a week-to-week basis. All right. It's not about that. It's about building each day onto each other, and then each week onto each other. And then 3-4 months down the road, you look at how far you've come. It's like, don't miss the forest through the trees, that saying, right? Yeah. Don't be so focused on the minute pros or cons of each day. Focus on things as a totality. And so you do not need to change programs every week. You might not need to change nutrition every week. The goal should be to be on as high calories for as possible to achieve the goal you want to achieve.
Okay. Carbs straight after a workout, overrated or underrated?
I think it's overrated. The research shows that it's overrated. It shows that we don't need to carb load right after a workout immediately, right? You and I know that from a research standpoint, but it does totally come down to getting your calories in for the day and all that. Now, are you going to feel better getting some carbs in after a workout? Absolutely. They're quick energy, right? But is it a necessity? And that's kind of where I think this question is. Is it a necessity to get a bunch of carbs in right after a workout? No, it's not. It's
Unless. About, obviously the caveat here is it
that's true.
Endurance athlete? Is it someone who has to compete tomorrow or has back-to-back competitions?
Now that is more important. Yep. I guess I was taking this based off of just the average person. But that's a very important point to make. Everything is very contextual, guys. Like if you are an Olympic athlete or a pro athlete, you're training multiple times a day, you got to get that food in because you have a quicker window you need to recover from. So I'm glad you put that caveat in there.
Okay. Next one. Carbs for muscle building, overrated or underrated?
I think it's underrated. I think that, and I kind of just go back to everybody like on keto and stuff like that, who you are not, and it's not from, I wouldn't say necessarily from the muscle building perspective, but from the energy that you need to produce the stimulus for growth, right? Because weight training is an anaerobic activity. Anaerobic activities primarily use carbohydrates as their fuel source. It just can't. Now, can you build muscle on a keto diet? Absolutely, you can, right? There's no doubt that you can. Are you going to be as efficient in the gym, power production, all that stuff, if you're not eating carbs? The answer is just no, you're just not going to. So carbs per se are not going to necessarily build your muscles bigger. It's going to help you produce the energy needed to progress in the gym to provide that stimulus for growth. So I'm going to say that they're underrated. I think they're very, very important for muscle, for the process of muscle building, I should say.
Same question, but for fat loss. So carbohydrates in fat loss, overrated or underrated? You could say properly rated is fair if you want to say that one. So under, properly rated.
You know what? I would say that they're underrated. And I think the reason I would say that is because it kind of goes back to that force production, the energy production and stuff in the gym. As we're dieting down, we're already not giving our body enough energy, right? That's what diets are. So when you're in the gym and you're weight training and you're on a fat loss, wouldn't you want the most efficient macronutrient in order to keep your energy production in the gym as high as possible? Like you're still going to be in a deficit, right? It doesn't matter. We know that if protein and overall calories are equated for, it does not matter how you mix and match carbs and fats from a weight loss or weight gain standpoint. However, when you start talking about performance, you want to give your body the most efficient energy source possible for whatever activity you're doing. So I think too many people cut carbs too low on fat loss. What happens is their performance suffers. So they're not actually exuding as much energy during their training. Thus, it's negating that calorie deficit they're trying to create. So I would say they're underrated. I think carbohydrates are very important. They are not an essential macronutrient for the body. We know that. But essential does not mean that they're not helpful. They are very helpful under the right circumstances.
And I would add to that, to your point, that majority of people who start on a fat loss phase, the first thing they cut out is carbs. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you could have more food if you leave your carbs alone, switching for more, obviously, less kind of processed foods that contain not just carbohydrate but fats. But
Right.
also, like, if you drop your fats a little bit more, you will have more food availability, and you can actually eat more, have more like food that contains volume, rather than, like, generally when you have fat sources, they're very highly density, calorie dense foods, but they are also very small. And like in so small amounts, you can get so much calories out of that. I think rather than cutting out your carbohydrates straight away, cut your fats, and you will be very, very much better.
Well, and that is why it's so crucial on a reverse diet to get your calories as high as you possibly can, because it just gives you more leeway to make those cuts as you come down. I mean, look at an example. An actual serving size of peanut butter is very small, right? Think of how much, potatoes, or how much cereal or rice or whatever you want carbohydrate wise that you can get for the same amount of calories, right? So that's a really good point on your part.
Yeah. Last one, and then we can wrap this up so I can let you leave and go for your day. Calorie cycling. Is it overrated or underrated?
Overrated. I think this is an easy one. Once again, does not mean that it's not useful, but we touched on this earlier too, that at the end of the week, it's going to be about the amount of calories you take in for the whole week. So just because you calorie cycle doesn't mean that you're taking away from that overall weekly goal that you have. You're just reallocating it. So I think as a whole, I think it's overrated. I think on an individual basis, it can be very, very successful. It can be very necessary. This is where knowing your client, knowing their lifestyle, knowing their habits and stuff comes into play. I mean, if someone's just really not that hungry on their rest days, well, don't make them force feed, right? Keep calories adequate, but give them more calories on the day that they're going to be training. Or if people know that, okay, I'm going out for the weekend, right? I'm going to be going out to dinner a couple times. Okay, let's go a little bit lower throughout the week. Let's save more calories for the weekend. Let's set you up for success. Let's not put you in a position for you to fail.
I love that. All right. The one thing that I wanted to ask you to wrap this up is, I know you have a podcast that you have been doing for a while. And I guess one of the things that I love about podcasts is that when we host podcasts, we always learn something from our guests, or there is something that they say that kind of resonates with you or stick with you for your practice or for forever. So I wanted to ask you 3 best takeaways you have taken from those podcasts or from your guests.
Oh, yeah. Making me think here for a minute.
It can be 1 or 2, but if you have 3, it can be 3.
Man, which ones would be the best? I'm trying to think back to all the episodes now. I think a lot of it, I think one in particular I did with Austin Current was, we talked a lot about how your mind and how your brain, really affects your training and your that sort of aspect, and just how important the mental aspect of things are when it comes to everything that we do. I'm someone who has been very open about my struggles in the past, and like I said, wrote a book about it. I'm very pro therapy and just pro mental health and all that stuff, but just understanding like how your mind is the number one factor in what we do. That's so important. That's so crucial. That was one thing. As far as the other ones, all of them to me have their own little individual thing based on the topic. Whether it be a training, a little snippet of a training that stands out to me, or mental health or dieting or something like that. But I think really getting to know the people in general, some of them I know very well, some of them I didn't know very well. I think kind of that is really crucial. Another one I did with, let's see, what was that? Well, I did that one, but the one I did with Kristen Dunsmore, that one really stood out to me a lot too, because we talked a lot about the female perspective with strength training. That was one of my, I have taken a little bit of a break from the podcast just with the baby. It's been a little hectic, but that was one of the last ones that I did. And that one was really, really cool to see and learn about her evolution through becoming a top female strength athlete. And from a perspective that as a man, I just don't know, like coming from a woman's perspective, as far as, okay, you're supposed to air quote that, right? You're supposed to be lean and bikini like and all that. That's the ideal image. But, she kind of started coming up in an era where strength training in women was just kind of getting started. And she's kind of helped grow that a lot. And she's been very successful, and just kind of learning her mind shift and seeing how she's shifted from her earlier days of training to the mindset that helped her progress up higher and higher. And now, she's back in school. She has her master's. I think she's getting her doctorate or something. And just using that to help enhance the research with training, not just in female, but in male athletes too, and everything. So that was a really interesting podcast as well. It's hard for me because all of them are I'm invested in each of them so much that it's like, man, which one? Shoot, I'm sorry. Sorry, whoever heard that on the recording. Someone was ringing in. Okay. But yeah, I think they all have their own unique things, but I think those two in particular are ones that really stand out to me.
Awesome. Where people could find you, where is that book that you have written? Yeah,
so the book is, it's on Amazon. It's called A Shell of Myself. You can just go to www.ashellofmyself.com. It'll take you right there. It's an ebook and paperback form. At Mathas Fitness on Instagram. My podcast is the David Mathas Podcast. And I also have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, David Mathas. So
awesome. Well, I love to talk to you, and having you on was good to catch up with you. You're an amazing soul, and I really appreciate you as a friend and as a coach and as a human being. So it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you soon in the US.
I appreciate it, Astrid. Thank you so much. It was great catching up to you. It's been way too long, and we'll have to do this more often. So thank you.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.